Good morning and welcome to Missoula Real Estate Today. This is Peter Christian. I'm here with the host of the show, Diane Beck, with Windermere Real Estate. Diane has been helping buyers and sellers with real estate in the Missoula area for over 20 years and is very active in the Missoula community. Along with their trusted partners, Diane provides complete service for your real estate transaction. And now, Missoula Real Estate Today on newstalkkgvo.com. 98.3 FM and 1290 AM. Well, I guess it's about time to say Happy New Year, the final program, recorded program of 2017. I'm Peter Christian. Diane, of course, not with us today, but she always sends us great guests. And for the very first time, we have Marc Winn joining us from Winnwood Flooring. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Peter. Thanks.
Tell us a little bit about Marc Winn. I understand you're a Missoula kid, right?
Sure. Yeah, I born and raised in Missoula. I went to Big Sky High School, graduated in 2003. I attended the University of Montana for a couple of years, and I ended up a couple of years into that. I ended up deciding to start my own wood flooring company, just to kind of. At the time, I thought it was just going to be something that I did on the side while I was going to school.
Kind of a sideline, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it eventually, here I am about 10 years later, and I'm still doing it. And
I understand that you worked for somebody else for a while doing hardwood flooring.
I did, yeah, and I started off working for another company. It's probably been about 15 years since I started working for them, and I worked for that guy for a couple of years, and then I ended up starting to do my own projects on the side, and while I was going to school, because I ended up leaving that company to go back to college, and I did some side jobs with rental equipment for a couple of years, and in 2008, I ended up starting my own business. My dad ended up choosing the name. He came up with Winnwood Flooring, and the funny thing is, and now I know, about Steve Winnwood. And I had no idea who he was at that point in time.
Sure, right.
Well aware now. So.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you something. I also own my own business, okay? And so there's something a little strange about us entrepreneurs. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that we don't mind working for somebody else, but there's something about the vision that you have for what you want to accomplish. So what vision did you have when you finally told your family, hey, this is it, I'm going to start my own business, this is something I know how to do, and we're just going to do it?
Well, I guess my vision was what appealed to me is I felt like starting my own company would kind of give me the freedom to do the things that I like to do. Knowing that I'm born and raised in Montana, I appreciate the outdoors, and I like to do things, whether it be snowmobiling or skiing at Snow Bowl, and I guess in the beginning I figured, I should start my own company, because then, I can kind of make the time to do the things that I like to do.
And not only that, though, but there's something about being the CEO and the chief cook and bottle washer. You know what I mean? Especially when you first start out. That can be really exhausting, right? So did you find that true when you first started? Yeah.
There's a bit of a learning curve to it, but I think also, I think over time I developed an appreciation for just having control over what's going on, and I like making those decisions on the spot, and I think that I've started to thrive on that over time.
Well, you learn to trust your judgment, basically, right?
Right.
So tell me what it is about hardwood flooring that makes it so special to you.
I think one thing that comes to mind is just every project is unique, every floor is unique. We're always working with different wood species and different finishing products and stain combinations, and I guess the artist in me really likes that about it.
Right, and I in our home several years ago we had carpet throughout, and it just got really boring, and so
yeah.
so we decided to take out a loan, and so we ended up putting hickory on
Nice.
in our all the way through the main
What
floor.
grade of hickory?
I'm not sure.
Probably a number 2.
Well, let's put it this way: it was really pretty. But as we rolled along, right? We've had it about 2.5, 3 years now. We've noticed that it's not quite as hard as hardwood we thought hardwood would be. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So for instance, I knew that hickory is an extremely hard wood, so I thought, gosh, if you drop something, it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
But we found out that wasn't exactly true.
Correct. Yeah. It's not concrete,
yeah.
but it's certain. Hickory is, really the hardest North American hardwood you could go with. And it's frequently when people are concerned about durability, I'll recommend hickory as being a top choice. But the fact of the matter is, there are things on this earth that are harder than hickory, and if it makes contact, it'll end up scratching it or denting it.
Like an aluminum or a tin can, right?
Exactly.
Or like a can of peaches or something.
Yeah, you'd be amazed that, and all wood has, there's hard grain in the wood and there's soft grain, and the soft grain is going to scratch and wear quicker than the hard grain in that wood.
Mm-hmm. So now what is your favorite kind of wood to work with? Or does that depend on the customer?
That changes all the time. Seems like lately, I've been, this year we've been doing a lot of quarter and rift sawn white oak floors. And, I'm a big fan of oak just because it's so stainable and, all the porous grain in the wood, it contrasts nicely with the hard grain in the wood. And I think that it's just, it's fun. It's easy to sand, takes to stain well, and it's hard. I think it lasts a long time. And then you've got that, with oak, you can choose a plain sawn cut, or you can choose a rift and quartered.
Would you mind? I know
Sure.
nothing. I know nothing about what you guys do. So that's why I'm always asking all these silly questions. Explain the different sawing techniques, if you would.
Yeah. So, simply put, with plain sawn white oak, it's just referring to the perspective that you're viewing the grain. So you're basically looking at the flat side of the grain. Whereas if you get a rift and quarter sawn floor, you're looking at the grain from the vertical perspective, or in rift is more of a diagonal. And when they harvest the logs, they harvest more plain sawn from a tree than they will the quartered and rift sawn. So it's a little bit, typically a little bit more expensive to get the rift and quartered because of that. But in some people's opinion, in my opinion, it's more aesthetically pleasing, and then it's also harder from that grain, or when it's cut vertically. So you're going to get, it's harder from that side.
Okay.
I guess what I'm trying to say.
So I guess what I would ask is, what is the best quality for someone who wants to have a durable, really beautiful floor? Would you prefer the other two, or would you prefer the straight, or does it really matter?
I think I would prefer the rift and quarter, just because I think that there's a lot more. I think the grain character is more beautiful, for lack of better words. But
it's pretty.
it's a really good, makes for a really good looking floor.
Right.
Like I said, it's really hard, so it's going to help with the durability factor. But the other thing to consider with rift and quarter sawn, wood, is that the expansion and contraction is more ideal, especially in our climate, because the wood, whereas plain sawn will expand and contract in width, in board width, rift and quarter sawn will expand and contract more in thickness. So that results in less gapping over time. It's a more stable cut of hardwood.
Now when people go out to the let's say the big box store, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and they buy 40 or 50 boxes of whatever type of wood is out there.
Mm-hmm.
What are they buying?
I guess
Well, especially if they want to save some money and do the job themselves, and
sure.
they watch the DIY video and I can do that, and so yeah.
Yeah, I think there's some good products. I've seen some decent products that they're selling at the box stores, but I think generally speaking, a lot of the products wood products anyway they sell are exotic, and you're going to see more expansion and contraction out of those because those woods don't come from our climate. You might see more color change in the wood over time and things like that. So I think if you're looking for a wood floor, you really got to kind of just ask yourself what you're looking for. If you're looking for a North American hardwood that you want to have sanded and finished on site, I wouldn't recommend going to a box store for those. I'd say go to a hardwood specialty store. But if you're just looking, for an affordable pre-finished product, you're probably going to get a good deal there.
Something quick and easy, basically. Yeah. And but you see, the thing about quick and easy is, does it really last like a really good hardwood floor?
And I guess I'll say, if you want it to last and if you want to get the most out of it, definitely go with a wood floor product that has a sandable wear layer. So you want to have a minimum, I would say, get something with a 1/4 inch wear layer, whether it's engineered or solid. There's a lot of engineered products out there that have a thin veneer on top of real wood.
Okay.
And the salespeople, I've often heard that salespeople suggest they can be sanded, but I would dispute that because, you don't really know. If you were to try and sand some of these, there can be hollow spots below the veneer, and you can really easily sand down to glue to where, it's unsightly and pretty much leads to a failed sand and refinish. So I would say if you want to get the most bang for your buck and you want to get a floor that's going to last the lifetime of your home, you just look for a product that has a minimum 1/4 inch or 6 mil sandable wear layer.
Okay. So what I hear you saying is that a hardwood floor can be an investment in your home, right?
Right.
So when I say investment, I mean it's going to cost a little more, all right? And you have to realize, there's that old saying, you get what you pay for, right?
Right.
And so how does that work for you when someone comes to you and says, I have, let's say I have $6,000 to spend, okay, and my house is XXX. How would you go with them? What kind of things would you suggest?
Well, it's nice when people give you a budget right off the bat.
Yeah,
it doesn't usually happen.
Right,
but, I'd just say, if I was given a budget, I'd look at the area that you want to fill, and then there's a broad spectrum of different species and grades to choose from, and my preference is always solid hardwood because I'm a site finish floor guy,
right?
So I'm always going to sway people that direction because I think it's a better value when you can sand and refinish it time and time again. And so with that said, I would say just look at the different species and the different grades. There's a lot out there to choose from, and
If you wouldn't mind, again, you're talking to a total ignoramus when it comes to hardwoods here. If you wouldn't mind going through the various species that people use out there, and even if you want to go into some of the exotics that people think, oh, gee, I want my house to really stand out and be different, and some of the advantages and disadvantages of each one.
Okay.
You started with oak a little while ago.
Yeah, so we talked about oak a little bit. You've got your plain sawn, your rift and quartered. There's white and red oak. I guess I'll just say that they're typically a good value. You typically, the narrower the width, the less expensive it is to purchase. So when you want long lengths, wide widths, that brings up the price. But there's maple is a good one. a lot of jobs we've done lately have been with a third grade maple.
What is a third grade?
So, and I guess I could talk about grading a little bit too.
Please do. Yeah.
So so the mills will grade flooring differently. So typically there's select and better, then there's first grade and second grade, and occasionally some mills have a third grade or a tavern grade.
Okay.
So,
so when you walk into your local bar, hey, there it is, right?
Yeah. And I think the Sunrise Bar bought some tavern grade and put that in. So, but I think so the mills, when they harvest a tree, there's going to be some boards with mineral streaks, with sap lines, with knot holes.
Right.
And some people don't want that, and some people do.
And those would be flaws, right?
Right.
Yeah, so you would consider them a flaw as an artisan, right?
Right.
Okay.
So, and just depending on what the customer is looking for and what kind of look they want to achieve, that's one of the first selections you have to make is what grade of wood you want to go with. With hickory, a lot of times they just have a rustic grade or a second and better just because the nature of hickory. I mean, that's why people choose it, is because they like that rustic look.
Right,
although they do have a select and better grade of hickory, and usually that's going to be absent of large knots, and it's going to be more consistent in color. Whereas if you go with a number one, you might see you'll have knots, but they won't be quite as big as the knots in a number two common.
Now, I will tell you, just real specifically, with our floor, we have a small home, okay? Mm-hmm. And so the hickory is so striking when you walk in the door. That's really all you're looking at. I mean, we got some furniture and some other things, but it's that.
It's a focal point.
Yeah, it really. You're kind of staring at the floor all the time.
Sure.
So I didn't even really realize that when we were looking for the flooring about what it would look like when it's all done and spread out. You go, holy smoke! This is it basically jumps off the floor at you.
Yeah, definitely.
So if you don't want that, if you would rather have something that doesn't draw all the attention to itself, so you want to go with something else.
Yeah. I hear that a lot, and it just depends on the person. Some people really want that rustic character that hickory has and all the color variation, whereas others might like something that's a little bit more clear. Doing a floor for my mom right now, and her preferences are just a little bit more clear. So we got a product that we can kind of grade ourselves. So we go through and we're cutting out the knots, and we're kind of customizing it to her preferences.
Well, it's your mom.
Right. I'll never hear the end of it if I don't get it right.
There you go. That's exactly right. So is she using oak or what?
Rift and quartered white oak.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So for your mom, that's now. Did she select that, or you advise her to select?
I had a little influence in that. Okay. Yeah, and she had a select maple floor before, just in the kitchen.
All right.
But we ended up deciding to remove that and just go for a whole new floor throughout her upper level. But yeah, so we chose a 6-inch wide rift and quartered white oak.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about oak. Of course, I've been speaking about hickory. So what are a little bit of maple?
Some other woods.
Yeah.
So you have cherry and black walnut are two, I think, beautiful species of wood that are great for this climate that we live in. Both of them kind of have their own unique tones. Obviously, I mean, walnut being a brown to black in color, and you can see some sapwood in that occasionally too. So it's nice when you speak of, you can look at walnut in a small sample, and then when you see it on an entire floor, it's almost a totally different thing, because you can get you'll see more color variation and whatnot. But both of those are hardwoods, pretty similar in hardness, not quite as hard as oak. But and cherry, is the one thing I was going to comment on cherry and walnut is that I think their grain pattern is really similar looking, so I think they're pretty complementary of each other. So sometimes we'll, if we do a walnut floor, I mean, and somebody has a fireplace, we'll picture frame the fireplace with cherry, and vice versa. I mean,
now let me ask you this: when you're doing a main floor of a house, and when they invite you in to come look at it and maybe take some measurements and that sort of thing, and you see they have a certain type of cabinetry in the kitchen, and they want a floor that's going to be, in your opinion, is not really going to complement, because all this has to flow together, right?
Yeah.
So what kind of things do you tell them?
Well, if their cabinets are a certain species of wood, I'd usually try and influence them in a way that the wood floor is going to complement the cabinet, certainly.
Sure. So they know it's to clash all the time.
Yeah. So, I mean, an example, if somebody has cherry cabinets, you probably don't want to put an oak floor down. I mean, I'd probably use cherry. Mm-hmm. I think it flows better that way, and some people's opinions might differ, but I'd like to be consistent. If you have other hardwoods in the house, and that's not to say that you can't choose a different species of wood. I mean, some houses have, we've worked on houses that have over a dozen different species of wood. I mean, it definitely, I think comes down to the homeowner's preference. And, one thing I've learned over time is to try and feel out what they would prefer. Sure. And kind of go along with that. And if there's something that I think isn't going to work or is going to look weird, I'll voice my opinion, but I don't always take it further than just voicing the opinion.
Talking with Marc Winn from Winnwood Flooring. As you could tell, we're talking about hardwood flooring here. And a while ago, you had mentioned that things look really different, that when you go into a store and see maybe a 3-foot panel of what hardwood flooring looks like, as opposed to seeing the entire floor spread out before you. What do you recommend to folks? They see that looks really nice. Do you recommend, in other words, are there jobs you've done where people would say, come into my house and look at what it really looks like when it's all out there? Is that something you'd recommend?
Yeah, well, and I guess maybe I'll kind of take it a different direction, but I think one thing that we do for people, when it comes to making decisions I guess I'd recommend, first off, look online, get around online, see what's there, see what you like, share it with your contractor.
Right.
And, when we're doing a site finish floor, that's really one of the advantages of it is, we can choose the wood species, and then you don't have to even choose the color until we're on site. So, we can be in our sanding process, and this is typically what I do, and I think what a lot of other floor contractors do is we'll do samples on your floor. So we can do several stain samples, hopefully not 100, but
yeah.
I've had up to 20 stain colors on a floor,
wow.
Just because I think it's really important, for a homeowner to get the right color that they want, and I've learned to focus on that and make sure that they're happy.
Let's talk about that, because I think there's a lot of folks out there that assume, that when the floor is installed, it just is what it is, and they don't realize that it's going to be sanded and finished and stained, and there are several steps involved there.
Right.
So what kind of input do they have as to how that is all going to look like in the end?
I think they have a lot of input into it. And like I said, there's a few different ways we can prepare the floors, and I guess maybe I could take you through a couple of the options. So, first off, ahead, if somebody doesn't know, and they know they want hickory in a rustic grade, we can source the hickory, install it. We do our sanding process, which, sanding sequences can vary slightly from job to job, species to species. But typically, the goal is always to start with the highest grit possible to avoid removing wear layer.
Right.
And then you work up the grits. Ultimately, we usually finish sanding at 120 grit. And we'll wood fill the whole floor before getting to the final grit. So everything, any gaps or any gaps from manufacturer defects and any knot holes and stuff like that get filled. And And then once we get up to 120, it's time to put our first coat on. So, and somewhere in there, usually before I get to my final sanding pass, we'll do the samples like I talked about.
Right.
And the first kind of choice we have is, whether somebody wants a naturally toned floor or whether they want a stained floor. Naturally, we refer to people in the industry call a natural floor one that's close to the natural wood tones.
Sure.
So typically, if we want that, then we're going to use a sealer, and there's a couple different styles of sealer to use.
Like a clear finish of some sort.
Well, it's a sealer. So typically there's oil-based sealers and there's water-based sealers, and the job of a sealer is to reduce grain raise and side bonding for when you put your finish coat on top.
Right.
So, and it also achieves the color you're looking for.
Okay.
These are natural floors, and there's several different manufacturers and that have slightly different tones out there. So, in a sealer, if we're sealing a floor, it's typically a little less labor intensive than if we're staining a floor. So, if somebody's looking to change the color, then we talk about putting a stain on. And then we, like I said, we can go through, do samples on the floor and allow the homeowner to choose, what stain they would prefer. And then what comes next is the finish. And the finish is what gives a wood floor its durability factor. So
now, are there different types of finishes?
There are different types of finishes. So we have oil-based polyurethanes, water-based polyurethanes. There are conversion varnishes. There are penetrating hard wax oil finishes. A lot of different options out there, and new trends and styles.
And that's one of the reasons why you want to talk to an artisan like you, who obviously you've been doing this for a long time. Yeah. So when people explain the effect that they want, then you kind of are thinking, ding, 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 ding,
right.
Category 1, Category 2, let's do this. Mm-hmm. I've had good results with this. Here's what it's going to look like. And you can lead them in that direction.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that, another thing with the finish is you choose what sheen level you want with the finish. And most manufacturers will offer a matte or a satin, semi-gloss, or gloss. So you can kind of...
It's kind of like paint.
Yeah. You can specify what sheen you'd like it at. Most of the time people are choosing satin, but I would say that matte finishes are definitely on the rise.
Believe it or not, we're running out of time. Yeah. So let me ask you this: what is the procedure of getting in touch with you, and how long does a typical job take? Let's say the house is already existing, and you've got to tear out some floor and put the new floor in. What kind of timeline are we looking at?
I'd say 2 to 3 weeks. If we're doing all the prep work too, which we do some of that. And then the installs typically a week or so, and prep work can be a couple days to 3 days, and sanding and finishing is 5 to 7 days, I would say.
Okay.
And it ultimately depends on the size of the home and the layout and the products we're using.
I need some contact information for Winnwood Flooring.
406-207-5331 is my phone number.
And you're online?
And I am online, winwoodflooring.com.
Great. It has been a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
You've given us a great education. This is awesome. We appreciate it. It's good
I appreciate it.
Good meeting you, by the way.
Good to be here.
All right, and that is going to do it for Missoula Real Estate today. On behalf of Diane Beck and the Windermere Real Estate team, I want to say thank you to everybody, and thank you for making 2017 a fantastic year. And again, thank you to Marc Winn for wrapping things up for us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Peter.
All right, have a happy New Year, sir.
You too.
All right, that's going to do it for Missoula Real Estate today. Happy New Year, everyone. We'll talk to you again in 2018. Thanks for tuning into Missoula Real Estate today. We hope you found the information over the last 30 minutes to be helpful. If you have any suggested topics for future Missoula Real Estate Today programs, or any questions about buying or selling real estate, please email Diane. Here's the address. It's dianebeck@realtor.com. That's dianebeck@realtor.com. We'll see you next week. on News Talk KGBO.com, 98.3 FM and 1290 AM.